In this season at Level Up Stronger, we're speaking with women across the globe who have found careers in male-dominated trades industries. It's often hard for women to see themselves in these male-dominated careers, but there's a whole lot of kick-ass women who are not only working in trades, but thriving. So we explore how they got there, what it's like now. In today's podcast, we meet Riley Neugebauer, who was tired of sitting at a desk all day and wanted a more hands-on career than the one her bachelor's in environmental studies was granting her. So she moved to Colorado and joined a solar photovoltaic installation team, where she's thriving in another male-dominated industry. We welcome Riley to the show. Let's jump right in. More than ever, we're in a day and age where people can now go online and see someone who looks like them. Tell me who you are and a little bit about what you do.
My name's Riley Neugebauer, and I currently live in the southwestern part of Colorado in a town called Durango, which is in the mountains. And I came from a really small place in western Pennsylvania in terms of my growing up years. And so this is considered rural, but to me, this is kind of like a medium-sized town of like 20,000 people. Beautiful place. But anyways, yeah, I'm 39 and I've moved a lot. I grew up in PA, but also spent some years in Colorado as a kid, and then lived in Boston, Washington, D.C., Durango, Vermont, upstate New York, Maine, and now I'm back in Colorado again. So I've had a lot of excitement, you could say, and a bunch of different jobs. And there's been a thread of work around the environment, I would say, is the main theme there, and working with people. I'm single, I've never been married, don't have kids, don't plan to have kids. So it's kind of my...
I'm right there with you. With you. So tell me a little bit about what industry you're in and how did you get started in it?
I work in solar photovoltaics or solar electric or PV as an installer and a project manager. And in general, I would say solar PV is just another form of power generation like coal or gas or something along those lines. But the difference being that it's considered a clean form of power. And so you're not generating fossil fuel emissions that contribute to climate change. So that's partly why I had interest in that. I don't think I initially had interest in just doing electrical work necessarily, but sort of through this path of solar being something that felt like part of a solution for me, that's where it was, along with the desire to work with my hands at the outside.
So you're doing electrical then? And you're doing the electrical hookups of the panels to are you mostly residential or are you doing commercial as well?
I'm basically have done all residential and tended to do mostly just the DC side of the systems, the direct current side up to the inverter. And then usually electricians will do the rest. And one of the companies I worked for had an electrician, so we did both. But
Gotcha. All right. So tell me, what's the day in the life of a solar photovoltaic technician?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see, paint a picture. It often looks like getting up really early, like most trades work, I would say, heading out to a job site, either meeting people there or you meet somewhere and ride in a truck or a van that has all the materials with other people. Get to the job site, often residential, at least you're checking in with the homeowner just to let them know you're there or whatever. And then often you're kind of splitting up after you do any unloading or staging that you need to do, like if you're setting up scaffolding or ladders or whatever. And then often if it's roof mount, someone gets on the roof and starts doing layout, maybe two people. Another person might start on the inverter side of things on the side of the house or the garage or wherever the components are going to go that are closer to the ground, maybe running some conduit. And so it kind of gets split up for a while, and the folks on the roof are doing the layout, and then they'll start doing roof attachments. So typically you're trying to hit rafters with whatever your attachments are. So you're screwing into rafters and you have to find them and make sure the layout is going to work with where the modules are going, and you want it to be centered and square and all those things, which I found was a lot harder than it sounds like it might be, actually. That's been one of the learning curves there. And then after you get the attachments in, then you attach the racking that the modules will sit on top of and be attached to. And then once the racking's down, you often are putting in something called optimizers, which are now required through the code on roof mount installations for fire reasons. And then you run some home run wires, which are ultimately the wires that connect your system back down to the inverter. Then you'll figure out how to get the modules up there, whether that's passing up through scaffolding or having a ladder hoist, or sometimes you have a lift if it's a big project, and you do that. And then while you're laying each module down, someone's connecting wires, and wire management is a big thing in PV, where you're making sure no wires are laying on the roof, because that's not allowed. And it isn't good for the system in terms of all the heat that's coming off the roof. And then towards the end, maybe under the last module, you'll often have some sort of junction box that is where the connections will get made from the wires that are coming up from the inverter through the conduit. And then you put the last module down, and then whoever was on the ground is probably finished or still working on those other components like inverter and disconnect and things. And then it just depends on whether you have an electrician or not, whether you're actually going into another panel or something like that. So it's usually 1 or 2 days for residential stuff.
Oh, that's cool. Are there still great rebates on the solar for residential?
Yeah, we're still at 26% federal tax credit this year, and then it goes down to 22% next year.
Hopefully they'll overturn that with the want to
build back better. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So what are some challenges for ladies like joining this industry? Because it's still a male-dominated industry at the end of the day. Most of the technicians are men. Most of the owners of the companies are men. And so like women are still going to be that minority. So what are some challenges that you've experienced in going into this industry?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. It's nice to have someone ask that question because it's tough. I had gone to school for a bachelor's. Then years later, I decided I wanted more of a hands-on skill after doing nonprofit work, environmental studies. Yeah.
Awesome.
Didn't leave me with a lot of hands-on skills, but I had grown up in a farm type environment, and my dad and my brother are both in the trades. I wouldn't say I learned much really from them, but it was sort of around me a lot because of where I'm from and my family. So I had done all this work on the nonprofit side and felt like I really want to get something a little more practical. And so looked into PV programs, and I had this vision around, I'm going to start an all women solar company. I had great plans. And this was back in like 2007 or something, or 6 even. And then did research, found this program at San Juan College in northern New Mexico. That was a 1-year PV system design and install program that unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but it was right across the border from Durango, where I had already been for a summer in my life and really liked. And so I thought, perfect, I'll move back to Durango. I'll do this program. Talked to the instructors and said, I don't really know anything. Is this program really going to do it for me? And they said, oh yeah, teach you from the ground up. And I said, okay. So I did it. I moved from Washington, DC back to Colorado. And then I ended up going to the program with 14 guys and myself. And essentially all of them had some sort of trades experience. They hadn't all worked in the trades their whole life, but they just had more exposure. And a lot of them did have more serious trades experience and wanted to get into a different field and all that. The instructors are great. The guys were great to me, but I ended up having a pretty hard time on the installation side of the learning curve because everyone else just they're here and I'm here in terms of learning, and my skill set of using tools and basic things for them that the teachers couldn't necessarily teach to my level because it was a gap. And so I did really well on the design side. I'd always been good at math. And so that part wasn't hard for me, but to be a really good designer and installer, you ultimately need to know how to do the installation and how the stuff goes together. And when you're still how do I use the drill correctly? It's sort of a big deal. So I did the program, finished successfully, but felt this whole dream of a women's company is pretty far away at this point because I feel like I really don't know what I'm doing. And so it was also the recession. It was 2008 then. And so solar was not where it is now. There was not a ton of growth and it was still pretty expensive. And so there just weren't a lot of jobs, especially here. So I just ended up working for a nonprofit again, doing some solar rebate stuff, and then got a job with a solar thermal installer who was a nice guy, but not a great teacher. And I didn't really want to be doing thermal because it's really different. It's more HVAC.
Significantly, different.
And then I gave up and was financially struggling, whatever, and just sort of I got to go get a job or go somewhere different or do something different. And so I ended up moving out east and was out east for 10 years, 5 of that in Maine, the other part in upstate New York and Vermont, and ended up farming and mostly doing nonprofit work again. Gave up the solar dream. And then not because I expected to leave Maine, but I decided to move back west again, got to Durango, and a lot of my connections were still in the energy sector. So I got back into solar again. And what really ended up saving me was I got a job with a nonprofit And so I started by volunteering, and it took a lot of pressure off of having to know how to do stuff or be under some sort of watchful eye around performance. It was like, you just get to go help. And I ended up very quickly getting into like the role of managing the whole organization almost with one other person, because the director got really sick at the beginning of COVID. And so I got a lot of experience in how you run a company essentially, and then got some experience installing without as much pressure as a for-profit, and was managing volunteers. And so it was a real mix of like everything, but did get to do a bunch of installs, which was awesome. I worked with a variety of personalities. It was okay. And then I got recruited by an electrician to go work for him for a year, which was nice because then I got to be an apprentice in the state and get some hours and do more full installation work with somebody who like really knew what they were doing, which was great. But I also, and I've had one other job that was really bad that only lasted like 2 months. And the challenges there working for for-profit companies that are really small, more like startup environments that are run by men. One company had no experience in solar at all. They're just in it for the money, no values alignment. That was really hard for me. And they were just crazy people. And then the other job with the electrician guy was fine, but I was getting asked to like babysit his kids and stuff. And it's like, you don't ask the guys to do that. Like, why do I have to do that? And like, no.
Interesting.
So that stuff was challenging. And I kept getting asked to do all the office work and the utility paperwork because the companies are really small and the owners often weren't that organized, and they could see I had those skills. And so immediately I get put into this stuff, these roles. And that was really hard for me because I felt like every time I was super clear, like, I really want to learn installation skills. Absolutely. And they'd be like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then
but here, go to this paperwork.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen to the dudes. It's just happening to me. So
wow. So those are some definite challenges then. That's a very interesting challenge because it's a smaller company, right? And so like you often will get asked to do things that maybe don't have anything to do with the mechanical knowledge or the trade because you are the girl. Go get coffee, go fill out this paperwork. You be the one who answers the phone, be the administrative assistant. When the reality is you're there to learn the trades. That's actually very interesting. On the flip side, what's been the most rewarding part of this whole career?
I really like to be outside a lot. And so the shift into jobs where I'm outside most of the time makes me really happy. And working with my hands and having this direct fulfillment of success feels so different than more long-term sustainability work and things, which is also important, but it's really hard to see the end goal. It feels like you're never there. With this work, I feel it's nice because you see sort of immediate success and you get to celebrate along the way, partly because you've also invested your physical body into what you're doing. And so there's a little bit of this kind of reward just in the sense of like, I did a thing and here's the thing and it's right in front of me. And I like the residential rooftop stuff because of the quick turnaround. You get this kind of like quicker gratification of the work that you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And lastly, I would say my body just feels so much better. It was a little counterintuitive for me, but working on a computer for 30 or 40 hours a week for a long time, my neck and my back and my wrists and everything were like getting pretty messed up, even in my like 20s and 30s. And so as soon as I shifted into like farming and then solar work, all of that stuff basically stopped happening. And so I think there's something to be said for just using your body for things if you do it correctly.
So if you could give advice to other women who are looking into getting into renewable energy, solar, or any of the other renewable energy fields, what would your advice be to those ladies?
I think that solar is growing really rapidly right now. There's such a need for just humans to be working in the field and all throughout the solar industry. So there's a lot of job opportunities that aren't just trades work. If you want to be in the trades, I think it's a great time to go get a job and try it out, even if you're not sure, because there is so much need and you could at least see, make it an experiment if you're not sure. And if you do know that you're someone that likes to work outside, you're not afraid of heights, you want to work with your hands, you are able to work in different kinds of weather, it's a good fit in that way. You do have to have a certain personality for that, I think. And I would say women should think about, like, do you like the idea of being in a small scale environment, doing residential stuff? Do you feel like that's a little more dynamic, I would say, and changing, although still repetitive in a sense, because you're doing the same thing on a lot of houses. But I feel like it's a little more interesting for me and my personality versus big corporate work or just bigger companies that have more established systems that might be more structured. You might get more benefits. You might have more access to opportunities moving up. That might be a better fit for some people who have kids or who have more needs around like structure. Anything you could imagine is probably available there and not just on the trade side. And I do think there's a fair amount of room to like move up, especially when companies are probably a little bit bigger. Although the startup environment too, it's like everything's changing all the time. So there's usually another role for you if you want it, if the company is growing, which most of them are. And then lastly, I would say, look at companies online and check out their makeup. Like, do they have women in the field? Do they have any sort of commitment to diversity and inclusion? Because I think that tells you something about the internal culture. And then you have a little bit of a sense and ask those questions during an interview. Yeah. And I think if you want to be in the trades as a woman, there is a certain amount of like, you just have to be determined that you're going to put up with a certain amount of stuff being said or done that you don't love, but that you're doing it because you're committed to the work and the skills. And I haven't had a lot of like really blatant stuff said to me on the job site by any means. And I think solar is maybe a little better in that way, actually, but it's still can be really hard because of other things that happen. Yeah. So it's like, you got to kind of be like, I got a goal and I'm going for it. And lastly, there's a group called WRISE that's for women in renewable energy. And it's a network and there's a ton of women if you're looking for mentorship and jobs. They have lots of jobs on their websites. It's a place people can look.
Would you recommend the ladies go the route of getting an education, going to some sort of solar program so they understand the fundamentals, or go directly into a career?
For me, the school part, it ended up not helping me that much because there was such a gap between doing it and actually getting a job. Now, because there are so many jobs, I actually think if you're the kind of person who needs a little bit of a lead in, like I did to make it feel like a little bit of a safer process, then I would say, yeah, try that first. If you're the kind of a go for it person, or you already have some skills, or you kind of know how to use hand tools on a basic level, even, I would say just go for it and get a job. And a lot of bigger companies have their own internal training programs where they will train people probably even from a pretty basic level. So if you're in that position where it's like, I don't have time for school or money, like I need to just go get a job and I kind of want to do this, then I would say look for the bigger companies in your area and find out if they do their own training. Because again, a lot of these people just need people to work.
That's really great advice. And so I think it's just wonderful to see ladies taking part in things that can help them actually have a career that doesn't require like an extensive amount of schooling, like anybody really, not just women, but like you could decide today to change your career and go, you know what I mean? And with either minimal trade schooling experience or jumping into a company because you maybe have some mechanical knowledge and actually be really successful at it. We're at a phenomenal time in history. And so I think that's really exciting.
My ultimate goal is I want to train women in solar. So I'm kind of simultaneously creating this business called Solar for Women. And the goal is in a couple of years when I really get my skills where I want them, that I'll be able to more fully launch that and do trainings and workshops and stuff for women.
How can we get this information out to younger women in high school so that they have the opportunity to even see that some of these careers are possibilities early on? Because I don't think our education system today is preparing girls for any kind of career other than the major, like normal women careers.
Yeah.
And so,
not the trades, that's for sure.
No. And like you, I had my father and my brother who were mechanically inclined. Like that's where I learned how to do a lot of the things that I had to do early on. Like it was carpentry and working with my dad in the garage and things like that. So I wasn't completely clueless when we first started this stuff, but definitely there was a learning curve there as a woman. You know, self-education is a big part of what everybody's kind of moving towards, less organizational learning and learning from people who already know the business, right? We as women also, because we are the minority, we don't realize how much power we have in the industries we're in.
That's true.
It's phenomenal. Yeah. So that's where I really feel like we are at that launch pad where women are going to really come into their own. And I think that we need to harness this and really make sure that we get it out of the gate the right way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's political implications, but also educational. And what's hard for me is I have so many interests. It's like, I'm trying to get this like very specific set of skills so I can do this thing. But then because of how my mind is, I'm like, but I want to do K-12 and I want to do like whatever. But yeah, I totally hear you. And I feel like the more we can align women around this greater, it's almost like a better network for women in the trades where you could cross trades and use that power of numbers to like push on some of this stuff around education. Because for example, I contacted the shop teacher locally and just said, hey, I'd really like to see solar be incorporated somehow into the high school like shop program. Yeah. I'd be willing to help figure it out. And he was interested, but he said, I tried teaching a girls class once in shop and I was shut down and not allowed to do it anymore because it's considered discrimination. So it's like when we don't even have the ability to teach girls by themselves unless it's an external program to our education system because it's seen as discriminatory, we're already setting it up to not work because then they're in a shop class with all guys and you just start the whole train from the beginning, you know?
Right. Yeah. And girls really do have such a disadvantage already because we're taught not to be men, right? You know,
don't speak up, don't take up space. Yeah.
Mechanical. Yeah. And so like then you put them into an environment which already they're at a disadvantage. And then you bring in the learning challenge of now we have to compete. And then I keep hearing this, everybody I've talked to, like, I have to work 10 times harder to be even seen as equal.
Yeah.
That's very discouraging for girls coming into these industries. You're going to have to work 10 times harder. So unless you're a real badass, like you're going to really, like, it's going to be a struggle. And so that's the part that, like, if you could separate them out so they're only competing with each other and at least get them comfortable, then mix them back in, I think that would give girls definitely a little bit more confidence that they understand the skill set before then they're now having to now even compete.
Right.
You know, which is
I totally agree
that the school system haven't figured that out. And
it's this challenge of dealing with this idea of discrimination at the federal level that then goes down through all the public systems where you would otherwise be able to build a platform. You can't do it. Like, I'm finding out about the apprenticeship model. It's the same thing. I'm like, I want to have a women's apprenticeship program. You're like, well, good luck, because you can't do it. You're not allowed because it's considered discriminatory. And so the way people are getting around it is they're doing these like pre-apprenticeship programs, which are allowed to be single audience focused. And so I feel like that's part of the answer is like model what California and some of these other states have in place already, where there's just more people and they're building these pre-apprenticeship trainings for women that get them into jobs. And that way it's not so overwhelming to go work with a bunch of dudes and try to learn something, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Another country that's really women focused is Australia. And I really want to dig into what Australia is doing because they are really promoting women in the trades. Australia is kind of a little bit more women centric. Several of the ladies I've interviewed are in Canada and they're about the same as the United States, but Australia is on to something and I haven't quite figured out where it's being mandated at what level is it working?
Cool. Oh man, let me know if you find out, because I'm in a tradeswoman group on Facebook that's different from the one you're in. Maybe you're in this one also, because I'm in like 3 or 4. And one of them is like basically all Australian women that they let me into. And that I have seen, I'm like, wow, these guys like really have their shit together.
Well, and I talked to several people who are in Australia and they're like, oh yeah, we have all of these programs. It's mandated. And I was like, okay, well, how can we get that going here? Because we are going to be suffering in the next 10 years. There is no way around it. Kids do not want to go into the trades anymore. So that's a problem. Then you have 51% of the population. We're not equal. It's going to be an uphill battle, but I think we're poised at the right time to make an impact. And if we don't do it now, it's going to be, we're going to be in trouble. So,
you know what I think we should do, Tiffany, is figure out like, how do we build a case, whether, like, I have a friend who works at Loyola in Chicago, and he said to me with some of the solar stats that are about women in the sector and stuff, he's like, you've put together a lot of research. Why don't you do a white paper, even if it's 2 pages long, and somehow maybe he'd help me publish it, but maybe more broadly do something like that for women in the trades and like use it as a leverage point to get the attention of the right people so that ultimately we get to like go on a trip to Australia that the federal government funds for us to go learn about what they're doing and bring it back. And like, I can imagine that happening.
That's a good idea. I think that's a good idea at conferences. So I want to see, I'm going to be pushing to do some panels with just women this year because I think it's necessary that we start, like, bring the ladies to the table who are in these industries, slogging through, figuring this out, and let's start promoting them. Because even the federal government, they're not meeting their goals for what they're supposed to be setting aside work for women-owned businesses, and they still are not meeting their goals, which I'm like, how is that even possible? Because there are women-owned companies out here. I work for one.
Yeah.
I'm running one.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. So yeah, definitely let me know if there's anything that you guys need help with. Happy to support in any way in getting those initiatives that you're working on off the ground and running. Because again, renewable energy is something that is close to my heart, but also as a company, sustainability within facilities and things like that is a key area of focus for us. And then we have several companies that we're kind of connected to that do renewable energy and things like that. And so I think this is an area that maybe there could be some collaboration that we could definitely help support you on getting that stuff up and running. Or even if your training program, you want to help getting that up and running, would definitely like to figure out how to make that happen.
Cool. Yeah. It makes me really think about how to better network people. And I guess the Facebook groups and things are part of that answer, but something more strategic and formal feels needed. I just don't know what exactly that is. So if you end up ever wanting to, like, get a little cluster of brains together to think on that, let me know.
It's always about where's the money going,
right?
Who has the money, and how can we get them to support for what we're doing, right? And so maybe that's what you had for.
Have you had to do that for your job a lot? Like, think about that part, or is it more like dealing with
it's always where's the money?
Finance.
So where's the potential money going? It's money in politics at the end of the day within just about every industry. But yeah. And so maybe we need to find a woman who's a woman investor. They've got their finger on where the money's at, right? And who is interested in renewables.
I'm working part-time with this organization called the Footprint Project that started pretty recently, and they're building solar generators that then get deployed after disasters to help provide small scale right now solar generated power that's off grid for people who've lost power, which is pretty cool. And it's neat to see these little things popping up that are trying to respond to this sort of modern world we live in. And
for sure.
Well, and for you guys, like, cybersecurity issues must be a big threat because of now everything being automated and Wi-Fi based and all that. It's like, I know in solar, it's becoming a big conversation because of all the utility scale stuff that's going up, and they know that they're at risk for hacking, and, like, you could shut down a whole power plant.
Let me know if you need any help with the education. And I think we need to circle back around on how can we get this training going? Because I think any training for women, especially women wanting to go into some of these industries, that I feel like will be very supportive of women being able to be successful in careers, that not to put teachers and any of those industries that are largely women down, but people are fleeing those industries for certain reasons. Where are they going to go?
Yeah, I agree. Where will you go and how will you support yourself? And ultimately maybe have some skills that also just help you, like, day to day, that are more empowering, I think is part of it for me. It's like, even if a woman decides after a workshop or something that they don't want to pursue the career, the fact that they came and did something and learned something that they otherwise would never have tried or learned with other women around can be transformative in itself, I think.
I completely agree.
Wait, so my other question for you is, did you imagine yourself getting into this executive suite sort of role when you started? And do you find that it's actually harder at that level in dealing with the male arrogance and all of that?
I was lucky to land in this company with a boss who was really like, I started out in the company when I was very small. I think we had like less than 20 employees, right? We have over 200 now. And I grew up from the very bottom. So as like a junior project manager, like at one point in time, I'd spent time in the field trashing out foreclosed houses. I mean, that's like as far down the totem pole as you can get, and worked my way up from there. I think for me, I never said no to the opportunities that came up, even if it meant that I was going to have to go be in the field, come home sweaty, dirty, and gross every day and figure out new skills. Like, I've pretty much done everything in residential that you could imagine in dealing with foreclosed houses, because we did a lot of work over a number of years. We had a large contract doing all of the foreclosed properties for HUD in the state of Michigan. Wow. So I just learned early on, just like, if I was going to work my way up, I needed to never say no to the opportunities that were coming my way. And I needed to create opportunities for myself. So that's really where 7-8 years ago, I think now, we created the facilities division. And that was a huge game changer for us. Is we had been doing residential for a long time. I had the experience with renewable energy from a previous company. I had done environmental, and the company was mostly an environmental company before that. And then I started the facilities division because, frankly, I just wanted one building to go to and not have 10,000 buildings spread out across an entire state. And we landed, I think it was just sheer dumb luck, to be honest with you. If I look back on it, I'm like, something was giving us some good karma somewhere. Because we stepped into some positions and landed some contracts in buildings that are very large buildings and have just worked our way up from there. But yeah, I mean, I've been through the whole, like, as a woman in a male-dominated industry, I'm labeled bossy, the bulldog, all of the things, arrogant, all of the words that people would never give the same word to a guy in the same position. I've had men who were equal stature to me at other companies sit across from me at a table and say, I hope you fail. You don't deserve to be here. Things like that. And I get to the point where I'm just like, I hope walking into a meeting, you underestimate me, because I don't have to try hard then, right, to succeed, because you already think I'm going to fail anything I do. And that's going to be phenomenal, right? But I just have learned never to back down from a challenge. And so no matter what is said, I have a seat at the table. I earned my right to be here. I've worked my ass off over the last 20 years. I sacrifice a lot to get here, and I deserve, for my opinion and what I want to do, to be heard. Yeah. And I'm not going to take no for an answer, because at the end of the day, I then have to put in the work in order to be successful, which comes with a lot of responsibility, because now I've stepped into the role as the COO of the company, and I'm trying to professionalize and learn from what other people are doing and bring in all of these different things to help us grow for the next 10 years. So that's a lot of responsibility as a woman in a male-dominated industry. And it doesn't seem to matter how far you climb up the ladder. Men who are equal to you are still going to assume you don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
But then if you tell them all the things that you've accomplished, they're always like floored that, oh, you were able to do that? Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course we were. So I think recommendation that I could give to anybody is opportunities are going to fall in your lap. Run with them, because you never know what that's going to lead to. I never expected coming to do lead-based paint inspections and junior project management at this company was ever going to lead to me being the COO. And I found that I am definitely the cultural leader of the company in driving cultural change, ensuring we are doing our best to be a good company that people want to come and work for, and definitely driving to figure out ways that we can plug women into these positions. Because it kills me. Like, every one of the field staff, they're men. I have had maybe 2 women in the last 8 years who we've hired or who've even been interested in coming to work in these trades. Right. And frankly, if a woman send their resume in today, I would figure out a way to plug her in some way, shape, or form. But they don't stay, because I don't think they understand. Once they get in their foot in the door, right, and then they're held to the same standards as everybody else, I don't think they're equipped. So now it's, how can I better equip these ladies, when they get their foot in the door, without being discriminate, because I want to give everybody a fair playing field, whether they're male or female, as somebody who's running a company. But how do you give them the ability to be successful, especially when they're coming in at a disadvantage, but I haven't figured out how to plug them in and make them successful at this juncture in time, which is something that I think we have to solve.
And I think that's the issue across the trades everywhere, because even companies that I've talked to in solar that are really committed to getting women involved, which there's 2 that I know of nationally that have that kind of real focused determination, they struggle with it and they're really trying. So it's it's taken us years of effort to just get to the point where we feel like we now have an internal training program that would really help women in a way that before didn't really exist. And you just get thrown into it like most trades with a bunch of dudes and expected to thrive in that environment. It's you have to start differently. And I think it does mean more training resources and more. I personally feel like the more we get women-owned companies and women-led teams where the team lead is a female with a crew that's all women or more women than men would make such a difference. But it's we have to get there first,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And with less than 10%, I think, of women, even in if you go one step up and look at the electrical, right, trades, it's less than 10% are women.
Yeah.
So, and that's the direct feed, I think, into renewable energy, because it's mostly electrical. So that's where that synergy in other trades is happening. But even there, they are not anywhere near like where it would even be something sustainable that you could use as a model.
I mean, most electrical companies just don't care. In terms of just pure electrical, I very rarely meet any company or people who work at a company that A, are not men, and B, give a shit. It's just like not even on their radar, because their assumption is there will be no women, or once in a very rare moment every 10 years you end up with a female, but she's probably not ever going to become a master electrician. I think that's the mindset.
It's really sad. Really sad. So I want to figure out what Australia is doing.
Yeah, me too.
That's something in the government. And I think the government's promoting those initiatives. And so if we can figure out how to plug that in.
Putting some money into it, I bet. Yeah. And I wonder if they've gotten around this whole like discrimination concept where it's like, yes, we have discrimination. That's why women aren't in the trades. So now you're telling me we can't have women's focused programs because of discrimination. I'm like, yeah, they must have figured something out. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll have to dig into that and see if I can get some of the Australian ladies to give us the answer on what's going on there.
Cool. Thank you, Tiffany. Again, I really appreciate you putting the time into something like this and being a woman who has made her way to the top. And instead of turning that into a reason to like exclude women because you're like, well, I made it, which does happen. I would say, I feel like you have a nice filter, and I really appreciate you for that.
It's time. I think once you hit a certain point, it's time to look back and say, okay, now who can I help bridge that gap? I don't want it to take every other one 12 years to get to the top of the pyramid. I have 3 nieces who I definitely want to be successful. I want there to be a much different world once they get here for them to be able to plug into whatever they decide they want to do. And so that means that those of us now, have to pick up the torch and carry it the next few years. So
agreed.
As demand for solar power generation has increased, so has the need for skilled tradespeople. So why not women? Like Riley, there are a lot of women who need or want something different, the ability to get out of an office and into the sunshine. Riley is a true inspiration, and she's tapped into a few really great organizations. I have no doubt that Riley will be successful in changing education for women in renewable energy. And she and others in her field are truly an inspiration and show that you can always shift your career, learn something new, and level up stronger into a completely new industry. Riley is another great example of women thriving in trades and now giving back to the next generation. At Level Up Stronger, we're striving to help women improve their lives, provide for their families, and maybe see themselves in a different career. What better place than the trades, where women can be recognized for their competence, expertise, courage, craftsmanship, leadership, and so many more things. We encourage all women to consider these industries, talk to women in the field like Riley, and get their perspective on how rewarding these careers have been. This has been another episode of Level Up Stronger. Join us next time for more Life of Women in Trades and discover how you too can level up stronger in your life. Thank you for joining us on Level Up Stronger. For references to resources mentioned in this episode and to receive updates on future podcasts, check us out on social media or at levelupstronger.com. And remember, each time we take risk, educate ourselves, and apply what we've learned to our lives, we level up stronger. Each time we level up stronger, we have the opportunity to reach back and contribute to someone else's success too.